Dwane. Welcome. Thank you very much to you and Adam also. I point out Adam is working with Dwane for joining us today and helping with this work. So I can see you now. Are you able to take
Yep, I
control?
should be able to. Sorry, this is so we here at EPA headquarters are starting into our beginning phases of getting back into the office. I'm in the office today, and I have not had to present from being in the office for 2 years. So, there's a little bit of growing pains trying to get my computer to do what I expect here. So I think I'm close.
I
We
can
see
see
your
your slide.
presentation now.
All right. Yeah, so you see it?
Yes.
Excellent. And also, thanks for kind of giving a brief intro for Adam too. So Adam is joining. Adam, we hired Adam from his most recent work was with the River Network. He's got a ton of history with helping people get data into WQX. And also he's got a great biology background as well and water quality monitoring background. So I actually will be putting you in excellent hands with Adam. I do apologize. I will need to leave this meeting a little bit early. But I will definitely stay on through the whole presentation and through the beginning part of the discussion. But do want to thank you all for inviting me here for this discussion. I do have a few brief slides, and then I've got a couple of demo things just to show you the types of things that can be done once the data are published within WQX and where the data can be available. And then I'm hoping we have some time for some discussion. So I will give you a little bit of history. So if any of you have been around within the water quality monitoring space for a long time, you may know some of this history, but sometimes it's valuable just to look back a little bit just to know how did we get to where we're at with WQX in the first place. So first of all, water data sharing goes way back within EPA. It goes back to the 70s. There was a mainframe system, which we currently call Legacy Storette. I don't think they called it Legacy Storette then. They just called it Storette. But it was around for quite a while. It was a pretty common way for people to publish their data. It lasted until 1998. It did have a lot of issues. There were a lot of issues in regards to data quality. There wasn't a lot of documentation around the data. And so it wasn't always easy to know how the data could be used. So there were a number of challenges. And then in 1998, EPA decided to embark on an effort to modernize that system. And they created something that they called Modernized Storette, and they actually did call it Modernized Storette at the time. And it was an Oracle-based database that they would give out to partners, states, tribes, anybody who wanted to be able to share data. And the idea was that partners would manage their data inside Storette, and then they would send a copy of that database to EPA on some routine basis, whether that was monthly or annually or whatever worked. And then that copy would be loaded into a central database here at headquarters, which would then be made available to the public. There were a lot of issues with that modernized Storette system. It was certainly a good attempt at trying to get better documented data. But some of the big challenges that we ran into is that a lot of the partners out there, actually most of the partners, there was very few who didn't do this, just did not adopt EPA's database. It was designed to be able to handle pretty much any kind of water quality monitoring you could imagine. But because of that, it was too complicated. It was too complicated to be able to use, and it was very challenging to use that software. We also ran into a lot of issues with technology. Just keeping up with technology was challenging. Oracle, we were constantly chasing Oracle, which became a challenge. And then the last bullet, which I already kind of mentioned a little bit, but really just trying to build one system that met everybody's needs resulted in a system that was just too complicated. It could handle any kind of water quality monitoring data you can imagine, but it was really challenging to be able to interact with the system. So what that led to is in 2005, we began developing something called the Water Quality Exchange, which actually, this is kind of an interesting part of the story, which is certainly relevant to the Pacific Northwest folks and where you guys are at. That was actually predated by something called the Pacific Northwest Water Quality Exchange, which was piloted by Oregon. And Oregon actually was a critical partner in us helping us design the very first water quality exchange. So what is WQX? WQX is a standards-based approach for sharing water quality monitoring data. So what that means is we define the basic concepts around which you would share your water quality monitoring data. Like, how do you describe a water quality sample? How do you describe the result that you're getting? What are the metadata pieces that help describe that result? And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. It essentially defines the common data model for communicating water quality data. So not so much about what are the core pieces of information that you need to store your data locally, but really rather what does somebody need to be able to understand how to use your data. It is designed to be automated. So the whole system is designed so that you can have your own system, and then your system can publish that data to us in an automated way. We don't really care how you store your data or how you manage your data or what method you use to store your data. You don't have to follow our same data model. You don't have to do things exactly the same way that we do. All that you really have to do is to be able to map your data to WQX, and we have different methods for doing that. And then essentially WQX also provides this standard format for publishing of data as well. So it's not just about sharing data, but it's also for publishing data, which really gets us to the water quality portal. And it has enabled us to be able to partner with USGS on the water quality portal to get all of our data that's shared through WQX published through the water quality portal in partnership with all of the USGS data that's being collected there as well. So essentially, WQX tells a story. It provides all the basic metadata around water quality sampling. It talks about who conducted the sample, what did they sample, when were they sampling, what time of year or day was the sample taken, where was the sample taken, why, what was the purpose of the monitoring that was being conducted, and the really critical metadata, how was that sample collected, or how is that sample analyzed? What were the collection methods? What were the analytical methods that were used? That's all critical metadata that WQX captures. This is a very simplified version of the WQX data model, just to give you a sense of the concepts that we have. Within WQX, we have this concept of an organization. That's essentially who owns the data. We have a project concept. That's really why you're out there collecting the data. So in this particular example, this Columbia River effort would be the project, and you would all essentially use that same project plus whatever individual projects that you might be collecting the data under. We have monitoring locations. That's where you're collecting the data. So these are the sites that the data are being collected at, and these always include some geospatial information, so latitude, longitude, coordinates, so that you can find things on a map. The the core of the WQX data model is in these last two boxes, the monitoring activity and the result. Monitoring activity is essentially a sample. We use this broader term titled activity because you can do more than just sampling. For example, you might be taking a field measurement. Maybe you're doing a dissolved oxygen reading or a temperature reading in the field. We also capture things like biological sampling. So maybe you're doing fish tissue analyses or sediment analyses, or maybe you're doing a biological sample where you are evaluating the benthic macroinvertebrate biota. So you can do all of that and capture all of those concepts within that activity. And that activity contains all the metadata around how you collected the sample, et cetera. And then, of course, results, which are fairly straightforward. This is the raw data. This is the dissolved oxygen value or the copper value that you get back from your lab. And it also includes all of the relevant metadata that describes that result value, which includes the units. It includes all the analytical methods. It includes whether or not it was a non-detect. It includes any relevant lab information as well. So there is quite a bit of other information that helps you understand the quality of the data. The way WQX works, and just to give you kind of some concepts, and I love the polls. That was really helpful just to kind of know where everybody's at, especially the question about how you all currently manage your data, and that's very relevant to this slide here. So we have our partners there on the left, which would be all of you. You guys manage your data in whatever works for you. For some of you, those were databases. For others of you, those were spreadsheets. And then depending on how you manage your data, we basically give you two different options for being able to publish your data to us. We've got the top way, which is WQX Basic. So WQX, this is the automated version. This is designed for some of our more high-end users that have technical folks on staff that can set up this automated process for being able to publish the data to us over the Exchange network. The data is all validated automatically online. Any errors are generated and sent back to you, and then that data goes into the WQX system itself. The other option, the one there on the bottom, is really for those if you're managing your data as spreadsheets. This one's probably more for you. And this allows you to use this system that we call WQX Web, which is just a website. You can log into this website. You can teach WQX about your data. You tell it what your spreadsheets look like, the order of the columns, what columns have which concepts within them. Maybe you might have some concepts that we require in WQX that you don't have in your data set, but they're always the same. So you can default that. You can translate values. You can do all kinds of things to teach WQX how to manage your data and how to be able to submit your data. Once you've taught WQX how to do that, you can essentially take that Excel spreadsheet, upload it into WQX Web, and then WQX Web will do all the heavy lifting of doing all the translations and the conversions and creating the submission file for you, and send that through the Exchange network through the same methods as WQX generally, and into the WQX system. And then what we do on our side is twice a week, the WQX data, any data that is submitted to us, we publish that data over to the water quality portal. So essentially what that means, if you share your data with us on a Monday, typically by the Thursday of that week, your data will be showing up publicly on the water quality portal. So it's fairly quick timing for that data to show up out there on the internet. The water quality portal is the other part, half of WQX. It's not essentially part of the WQX system, but it really is a critical piece of the entire story. So the water quality portal is a partnership between EPA, USGS, and the National Water Quality Monitoring Council. And what the water quality portal essentially allows us to do is it allows us to publish the data in a standard way, so that all of the data that's coming from all of the people that are out there publishing data comes back in this common format with all the terms harmonized. And there are also a suite of what are called application program interfaces or web services, or basically ways to interact with the data to allow you to use that data in whatever system you want. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Water Quality Portal website. You are not constrained to the Water Quality Portal website for getting access to your data. You could use whatever you want. I'm showing a number of examples here on this screen, whether that's R, there are R packages, there are Python packages. Excel itself can connect directly to the Water Quality Portal and pull data directly down into it, or whatever you want to do. You can incorporate the data into your own websites, etc. So the Water Quality Portal really is just kind of broad publishing of data, and the data are published in such a way that you can really use them in whatever way you want. And I'll show you some examples of that here in a minute. So the Water Quality Portal is this one-stop shop for water quality monitoring data. We have data from over 400 partners and the USGS data as well. There are currently over 425 million individual water quality results collected from over 1 million monitoring locations. So that's a fairly large data set. When we first released WQX, this is always kind of a fun history, but when we first released WQX, prior to WQX getting out there, I believe the store at Warehouse had somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million water quality results. Within that first year with WQX, I think we doubled that. And we were super excited about that. And so that was about 14 years ago. And here we are at 425 million results. So that's just incredible growth, and it continues to grow at an accelerated rate. The data use common terminology across USGS and EPA. That's a really big deal. If you've been around in this space for a long time, you probably do remember that prior to about 2010, 2011, if you wanted USGS data and EPA data, you would have to do all kinds of work to try to get that data in a common format. It's built upon this concept of an application program interface, so that allows you to integrate it with any other application. There is a pretty simple interface that's available at that URL there, waterqualitydata.us. And it provides data in all kinds of different formats, including Excel, tab separated, comma separated, KML, and then there's the raw WQX format, which not very many people use that format, but it is available if you want to use it. And then the last piece that I'll talk about here is really just to give you a use case or an example of how and why the data being published is important. So back in June of 2020, we released at EPA a new system called How's My Waterway, which integrates data across the water sector. So it tries to pull data from water quality monitoring, water quality assessment, drinking water, permits, to give the public information about water quality in their local area of interest. It relies very heavily upon the water quality portal. Any data that is published in the water quality portal shows up in How's My Waterway. And their URL is down there at the bottom, and you can also scan that QR code as well if you want to check it out. And I'm actually going to just show you a little bit about what that looks like here in a minute, but just to kind of give you a sense as to why all this data management and publishing your data is important. And How's My Waterway, I think, is our best example of why that's important. How's My Waterway is this very visible, very publicly accessible data site location that is pulling data from all these different places. How's My Waterway, just to give you an example, is typically within the top 10 websites hit within EPA. It is used in classrooms throughout the country to teach grade school kids, high school kids, middle school kids, and colleges as well about water quality. So it's just an incredible location to get your data published and to get people out there seeing your data. But it doesn't come easily. There's a whole suite of things that had to come together to make How's My Waterway a reality, including the concepts like WQX and data standardization and electronic reporting and tying data to common hydrogeographies and standardizing around common terms, and all of that stuff had to happen in order to make How's My Waterway a reality. And so, I would encourage you. I'll often hear people talk about, oh, I'm going to make a new web portal and show off my data, right? Very easy to do that once. Very difficult to do that in a long, sustainable way. And so How's My Waterway is designed in that long, sustainable way where it is connected to the actual source systems. It does not have a copy of the data. It's connected to the source systems themselves. And all of those source systems have been designed in such a way that the data can be ingested by something like How's My Waterway. So I'm gonna stop here, and I'm gonna pause just to see if there's any immediate questions, and I've got just a couple quick demos to show you.
Dwane, we had one comment come in the chat.
Okay.
Getting a little bit of echo here. Sorry, we'll try again. How many states and tribes currently are contributing data to the exchange? Do you know?
So almost all of the states are contributing. I think maybe there might be one or two that are in a temporary hiccup of getting their data in. And tribes, and Adam, you might know the number off the top of your head. I think we're a little over 200.
Wow.
Actually went to a table and looked at over the history. Some of these orgs are probably extant now, but there's been 385 different state organizations and 318 tribal organizations in WQX.
That's terrific. Diane Barton asks, does NOAA contribute data on estuary conditions?
Yeah, so NOAA is a tricky one. So NOAA, we have been trying to engage with NOAA for a couple years. So currently, no, we do not have the NOAA data. I am hopeful that there will be a time in the future when we will have the NOAA data. We do have data from several other federal agencies. Bureau of Reclamation publishes data, Army Corps, National Park Service, BLM, Forest Service. I wouldn't say we have all of their data, but there are certainly parts of those organizations that are publishing data through WQX as well.
Okay, other folks that have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. You can come off mute and just ask your question to Dwane directly, or Adam. Dwane, while we're waiting for those to roll in, is it okay if I post your email and those links into the chat for folks?
Oh yeah, that would be great.
Okay, here they come.
So, Greg, I have a question. Dwane, I have a question. First, Dwane, thank you so much. This is so great. And thanks to Jen for getting you to do this. This is fabulous. And so what we're hoping is that, and I think Jen was going to mention this to you, or you already know, we're hoping that as we move forward, I mentioned that a lot of the grant applications we're reviewing right now are monitoring applications. And we're looking forward to working with you guys to do some more webinars or technical assistance on WQX, because we have a lot of people out there that are going to be getting grants that haven't done EPA grants in the past, and whatever technical assistance we can give them, we would really, I think that would be great. And we have a lot of major influx of funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law, and we're looking at, some like a separate RFA in the future for tribal governments, and like whatever technical assistance we can get out to people would be really great. So I hope we can count on you to help us on that without imposing on you.
That sounds great. And that's partly why Adam's on the phone as well. So Adam was hired specifically with that task in mind, not for Columbia River, but with setting up and rebuilding our WQX training capacity. So COVID, I would say we took a pretty good hit on WQX training as a result of COVID, just because online WQX training is tough. It's something that really has to be done in person. So Adam is starting to put together some plans for how to do some additional trainings and open up trainings. So yes, absolutely, that is something we're looking forward to doing.
We've got a couple more
Thank you,
questions.
thank you.
Oh, Aaron asks, what's the status of the data interoperability network?
So Aaron, you're asking about the sensors. So there was another project that I led a few years ago. It's called the Interoperable Watershed Network. Aaron, is that what you're asking about?
That's right, Dwane. It's nice to see you. Thank you so much. Just curious if we're making any headway on that challenge.
Yeah, so the sensor data, and I'm glad you brought that up because I did not mention that. So WQX is very much designed for sampling data, not the real-time sensor data. It's an essentially different data model for the sensor data. So a few years ago, we did do some experiment projects to see if we could set up some ways to allow for the publishing of that sensor data. I would say that experiment was successful. It worked. And I actually think, can't remember, I think DEQ, you guys are publishing data to that existing network, even though it's kind of not being maintained. So I've got another new staff person. I've been able to hire 2 people this last year. Adam was one of them. One of my other staff people was a person named Christina Mullen, and she is tasked with picking up that project and figuring out what the next step is. Because what's happened since we finished that project is that the Open Geospatial Consortium, which does the standards that we did that project off of, has released new standards, which happens sometimes. And that was one of the challenges that we discovered as part of that project, was that the existing standards that we did use worked, but they were a little slow. So the new standards that the Open Geospatial Consortium has developed are much, much faster. USGS has adopted them for some of their sensor data, which is hopeful as well. So Christine is tasked with picking that project up and trying to figure out what the next step is, with the hope of us turning it into something that actually is implemented instead of just an experiment. So stay tuned, I guess, is the short answer. And hopefully we'll have something sometime in the next couple of years.
Fully supportive of that work. And I think, given some of the wildfires we've had out here in the West, the utility of those continuous stations when they come online for drinking water providers or for any number of questions that evolve out of those emergencies is really helpful. So I'm 100% behind the effort to try to get all of that online and available to people.
Yeah, right.
So Laura Shire asked if the database allowed for habitat information to be entered.
It does. I would say that of all of the parts of the data model, and just to be honest on this, that's the weakest part. And the reason why that part is weak is that when WQX was designed, and actually I would even argue today, there is not a lot of standardization around habitat data. And so that is certainly better than 13 years ago when we designed that data model. But it's still, habitat data is still a little bit the Wild West. There's lots of different ways that people do it. And so, long story short, yes, it can handle it. Will you run into some frustration in it? Probably. But Adam can help navigate all of that as well.
And I'm going to jump in and add to that, because we, and Becca Scully's leading this project, but it's a PNAP project Becca's leading. We have been poking at that specific question about sharing habitat data and working with the EPA's NARS program staff. And so it's an interesting story, and Dwane hit the nail on the head. The data are not as standardized as water quality monitoring results, for example. So it is much harder. But we're looking forward to working more with Dwane and Adam on that habitat thread and exploring how we might be able to help expand the data standards that you guys have in there, because Becca's worked through with a bunch of experts running habitat monitoring programs to create a control vocabulary, basically. So hopefully that we feed that work with you guys and we all advance that topic. So yeah. I'm glad to see Laura, because that's part of what we're after with this work. This project's focusing on toxics, contaminants data, but we all know we need to do better to integrate those data with other types of data like habitat or fish populations, et cetera. That iceberg, I hope I can steal that iceberg image from you, Dwane. That is a really good way to articulate it. All right, I see somebody else has a question.
Let's see here. We've got a couple of hands up.
It was-
Will Hobbs.
Hi, yeah, thanks. Thanks for the talk, Dwane. So I've actually not personally used WQX, but I know that our agency does. So I'm with Washington State Department of Ecology. And one of the questions I had though has to do with, you know, the data packages that we get for toxics data. They're often quite large, and they contain a lot of quality control data that has laboratory flags and a lot of blank data. And often that data is then used to censor some of your results. And so I'm just wondering if you could talk about whether, you know, you've had those discussions on how to incorporate that type of data, or if you do into WQX.
Yep. Yeah, we can handle all of that. So the model actually is very well designed for that. So that activity, there's all kinds of different activity types, and that can include those QA/QC activity types, whether that's blanks or duplicates or whatever. So those go in as separate activities that you can then connect back to the sample activities. And then there are also actually a couple of data elements that can capture those censoring. So if you need to either put a lab remark code or a flag, or even just flag a result as to not be published, you can do all of that within the system.
I'll add, you can also report any of the reporting limits or detection limits associated with your method alongside the standard value as well.
Yep, perfect.
Aaron Borsenko, do you have another comment or question?
Just a quick comment that I know some states are using the ambient water quality monitoring system as their data repository for a lot of information, and Oklahoma is currently working with that group to map habitat data using the EPA's methods for the NARS assessments into that system through an exchange grant. And so I believe the project end date for that is September. So they're hoping to have all that work done. That we've been kind of talking to them about that work, but it would be nice to see it be able to make its way into the portal. At least that starting point of the National Aquatic Resource Surveys.
Yeah, that is exciting. And the developers of that system are the same developers of WQX as well. So hopefully we can get them to share some of that with us, right? So that would be great. Yeah, I think the one big challenge, and you know, this is getting a little off topic, but the habitat data, the entire WQX data model is built around points. So where you've got a sample that's taken at a point. Habitat data isn't necessarily that. Habitat data is more information about a reach. And so we have no way of describing that within WQX. So that's one of the challenges that we have that has always been on my mind, and trying to figure out when and how to tackle that one is a bit of a challenge. All right, any other kind of last questions? And I've got maybe just a couple quick demos for you, and then we can have more open discussion.
Well, we're not going to leave the topic of data management, so why don't we jump to your demos, and then if folks, perfect. We'll have a more discussion after that.
All right, let me share my screen again.
Right, we have some more Slido polls teed up for you after this to get some,
excellent, encourage
the discussion.
All right, so the first thing I'm going to show you is how's my waterway. So I already queried this to the Dalles in Oregon. I thought actually this was a pretty interesting spot. They're on the Columbia River. This is showing the overview of what's going on there, but just to show you how easy it is once the data are published in Water Quality Portal for that data to show up anywhere. So if I toggle this monitoring and sensors tag, I'm going to turn off the waters layer right now. Every single one of those purple squares is a monitoring site that has been published through the Water Quality Exchange to the Water Quality Portal. So every single one of those is one of those sites. There is one little yellow dot here. That's a USGS stream gauge. So we actually are incorporating the USGS real-time data in here now, which is kind of a nice placeholder for what Aaron talked about for the future. When we are able to get data published in that more consistent way, it'll be pretty easy to incorporate that data in here. And then just to show you again, just some of the power here, I'm going to go to the monitoring tab, which allows us to even a deeper dive here. So I see all 80 of these sites. And I can actually toggle this too. Like, let's say maybe I'm interested in metals. I want to know where the metal samples have been taken. I toggle that on. There are all the metal samples. And again, just to show you the power of the water quality portal, I can click on any of these. And there we go. Just took it a second. And it's going to give me that site. And I'm going to get how many samples are taken there, how many results. And I could actually, then I can see what types of data are there. And I can actually download that data as an Excel file. So if I click on this, it's going to go to the water quality portal. Notice it's not taking me to another website. It's not taking me to someplace where I got to push another button. I just get the data there in my browser for the results for that particular site. And we're looking to add additional capability here to allow you to be able to download all of the data for that site, or all the data within that HUC 12 or possibly broader. So again, that's all kind of the power of these web services. And then the last thing that I'll show you is, again, something connected to the water quality portal. This is not a tool that I'm necessarily trying to show off here. It's really just showing the capability. So this is Excel connected to summary services that come off of the water quality portal. And I ran this earlier just for the sake of time. This is all of the data for the state of Oregon for the past 5 years. So this gives all of the data. I've got a list here on the left of all of the entities that are collecting data within the state of Oregon. So you see a really long list there. The total number of the total number of results by year that have been shared. You get a chart here of how many results available from each year. And then you could also even do deeper dives on this as well. Let's say I'm again interested in inorganics major metals. I can see who's been collecting that data in the state of Oregon, and it'll filter all of that dynamically for me. So now I've got a new list of who's collecting that data up here. And I can even tell what the characteristics are that are being sampled, what counties those are in, what 8-digit HUCs. And then if, again, this is just standard out of the Excel capability, and notice that I haven't even gone to the water quality portal website. It just grabs all this data automatically for me. Here's a nice map. Again, standard out of the box Excel capability. Here's all the data in the state of Oregon. You see all those little spots, and the taller the bar, the more data are available there. So again, this is what makes publishing your data to WQX so powerful, is that the sky is really the limit in terms of how you want to use the data, manipulate the data, publish the data, visualize the data. Once the data are there in this common format, it's really easy to build these kinds of tools and interactions with the data. All right, so that was really just to get your mind thinking a little bit. And now I think we can go to more of the general discussion.
Thanks so much, Dwane. Jen, would you like to introduce our first discussion topic?
Sure. So yeah, and thanks, Dwane. That was awesome, especially the capabilities of Excel. I didn't know that you could use it so easily with the portal. So that is awesome. So so this